In this video, we're going to combine render engines. Not only does this give you a fabulous stylized look, but it also speeds up your render times as well. Let's hop on over into Blender. Okay guys, so let's get to it. The first thing we want to do is decide on which model we're going to render out. Go and grab one of your own. Go grab this from the downloads, link in the description below. And yes, once you've got yourself a ship or something like this, you may have played before with Matcaps. And this is what we're going to do, but you can combine totally different render techniques if you want to using this method. So we're going to turn the shaded mode, the solid shading, down to Matcap, just to preview some of the settings we can have here. And we can click this orb, and we get a series of options. One of my favorites for this particular example is this really shiny one here. So this is a great way of using built-in materials in order to change the aesthetic, the style of the model we're going for. We will also want to test out how this looks when we're rendering it, so perhaps out in Eevee. So we'll want to make sure that the camera is set up as well. I'm going to press 0 on the numpad, press Shift and the tilde key, and whiz round here using WASD. So let's say this is the angle that we want. Let's go ahead and render that out and see what it looks like. Pretty bland and boring. So as always, nothing's turned on by default with Eevee. So let's go render engine Eevee. That's fine for the moment. We'll talk about mixing and matching them in a moment. Ambient occlusion on. Make sure you're in rendered mode, by the way. Up the top here, viewport shading. Bloom. Whoa, that's bright. But that's actually quite good for what we're going for in this particular scene. You might want to dull that down on your render if you want. I'm going to change that with the emission setting, I believe. Screen space reflections. So we can render out an Eevee scene right now. Brilliant. I'm going to change the background, make it a lot darker. So let's go to the world settings, change our color here, dark color towards the blues. I think that's going to look pretty good. So the next thing I want to do here is render this, but render it not only just in Eevee, but with the Workbench settings as well. So in order to do that, I'm going to go at the top here and create a new scene. Let's call this one Eevee for the moment. And we're going to copy the scene here, and it's going to be a linked copy, which means all of our objects stay the same. And we're going to call this one Workbench. And this is the key here. We do need two separate scenes that we're going to combine afterwards. Let's go to the render settings on this scene and change it to Workbench. Now this is something that will catch you out. So whether you're in solid shaded mode like this and you've changed all of the settings in here, maybe you've even added cavities really to bump up where the ridges are and valleys to make sure you've got those dark areas as well. Well, switch over to rendered mode. You'll need to set them up in the render tab just over here. So let's go ahead, set Matcap. I'm going to pick the shiny black hole type one, and let's have a look. Let's turn on cavity. I'm going to turn on both world and screen space and just turn them all up to the max for the moment, just to really accentuate the shadows and the shading that we've got on our model. Finally, and this is entirely up to you, we can put on something like freestyle. I did do that on my original one you saw at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one off for the moment, and we can always come back and turn it on. Now that we've got these two scenes set up, what we need to do is create a third scene. This doesn't actually have to be a copy of the others, so just a new scene. I'm going to call this scene Combined Render, just to be clear as to what it is. Then go along your workspaces at the top and let's go into the Compositing tab. Here we need to set up a few things. So we need to tick Use Nodes at the top, and this Composite over here, this is going to be our final output. Then we have our render layers. We're going to do Shift and D and duplicate those render layers. Let's move this out of the way so you guys can see the screencast keys as well. So we've got render layers here. Now we can pick from this drop down Eevee, and we can also pick Workbench. Next, we're going to go Shift and A and add in. I'm going to search for it, so we're just going to add in a simple mix. Pop that in there, join them together. Now we can't see any preview at the moment. If you've got Node Wrangler, you'll be able to control click on this. I don't have it installed just yet. So I'm going to add a viewer node and link that across as well. Then we can see what's going on. Now we don't see anything at the moment because we've not rendered, so let's hit F12. Once the render's done, you'll see in the top render layer here, we've got the Eevee render, and we've got the render layers underneath with Workbench. Then we've got the factor slider that we can move across, but that's not really how we want to blend those two images together. What we want to be able to do is change it. So instead of a simple mix, we're going to do a multiply. Then we can add them together and we get a really cool effect. Now this doesn't just work with Eevee, it'll work with multiple renders. So we could, if we wanted to, composite on top of here a cycles render as well. We create a new scene, we come in, let's go to the Eevee scene, create a linked copy, then we can come to the render engine, change it over to cycles. I'm going to put it on GPU compute. I'm going to turn on under render denoise. and I'm going to use optics for mine. And let's make sure in the compositing tab, and we've lost everything here, so I'm in the wrong area. Silly me. Go back to your combined render first, then you'll see your nodes that you've got. So we need another one of these up here. So I'm going to go Shift and D to duplicate it. Going to switch over to cycles. And then obviously we've got our passes out here. If you want to use this as well, you can do. So you can pick and choose here. So we can have a cycles version and a Eevee version if we wanted to. So let's move those out. We don't have them yet, so let's go ahead and render, and it will render all of those for us. Might take a few seconds. So that's completely different, isn't it? With the canopy actually being glass and see-through. Let's close that down and have a look at what we've got here. We should have, let's disconnect it and reconnect it again. Sometimes the compositor can be a bit slow, but here we go. We've got that cycles render now with the added layer from the workbench. And of course you can come in at any time, go back to your workbench settings, change this, change the matcap round and see what you get. So this is a common one if you're doing sort of cars and things like that. My voice is starting to go. And let's go back to combined render and hit F12 to render. So I'm going to connect and reconnect. I wonder if that's a 3.0 beta issue that it's not refreshing these automatically. But there we go. I think this is a really cool way of spicing up any of your renders. Okay, so that's it. It is really that simple. Very easy to stick multiple different render engines together and get the best of both worlds. So if you found this useful, give the video a like. Subscribe for more content like it. And if you'd like to support the channel and its growth, go check out my Patreon. See you in the next one. Take care.